If you enjoy our videos and want to see more of them, head on over to our Eons of Battle Patreon. Greetings, gals and ghouls! Welcome to an eerie episode of Eons of Battle, and in this video, I am going to show you how to plan and make your own spooky diorama. Before we get into the cider and pumpkin pie of the video, I'd like to talk a little bit about Halloween. This spooky holiday in October is by far my favorite. I love horror movies and being scared, and this season has those things in abundance. The colors, smells, and spooks put me in the mood to jump out of my comfort zone of army painting and make a spooky diorama. And for some added fright, take a drink every time I say the word spooky. I don't often build dioramas. I like my toys to be toys, and the hope of getting my models on the tabletop is part of the fun for me. But I also like the idea of having a snapshot of the season I can keep on my desk year-round. My only history with this type of hobby is this diorama I made of a model kit of Anakin Skywalker's pod racer from the scariest movie of all time, Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. Talk about spooky. The base this model came with left a lot to be desired, so I made my own. I bought a piece of nice wood, carved it into a base with my scroll saw, and glued the model to it. I don't think I even stained it. I built up the base to look like the desert planet of Tatooine with wood chips and wall spackle, and I think I did a pretty good job. Overall, I'm very pleased with the job I did, and now I'll always have a reminder of little orphan Annie taking part in a death race to help a space wizard buy an engine from a flying goblin. Anyway, dioramas are a fun way to exercise your hobby skills. It's a departure from classic modeling and basing, but the skills overlap, and you will be a better hobbyist for it. The thing to think about when planning your diorama is you don't want to leave much of anything up to chance. Because if there's not a strong narrative or idea, then your diorama will look kind of empty, just like a spooky graveyard. The more prep work you do in the front end, the faster and better the overall piece will come together. And you can still make spooky accidents and dangerous discoveries along the way. Just make sure you have a plan, and always check your candy. The first step on this dark and spooky path, creating a mood board. A mood board is a collage of images that help get what's in your head in front of your eyes so you can examine it and plan accordingly. Sometimes this is referred to as Pinterest. It may seem silly, but it's a crucial step in between a fleeting thought and a first draft. It doesn't take a lot of work either. I just hop on over to Google Images, type in spooky, and start collecting images that jump out at me. Sometimes, literally. Before I knew it, I had my collage ready to behold. The mood board is a collection of images that give me an idea of what I want. It's basically letting the subconscious drive for a while and see what it finds. And here is what mine found. When I look at all these photos together, what I see is nighttime and framing. A lot of these photos are from movies or photographs and are arranged in a very deliberate way. Framing is going to be an important thing in my diorama as well. The mood board helps me make discoveries. Once photos are sitting next to each other, you can start to see what's the same and what's different about them. On my first slide, I have some clip art, film screenshots, and a spooky pumpkin. My thinking here is that these are the colors and shapes that make up Halloween to me. Jack Skellington framed in the moon is so powerful, and I want to do something similar in my diorama. Trick or Treat is one of my Halloween faves, and it does a wonderful job of blending spooky and scary with cute and festive, and that is definitely something I want to have in my piece. Moving on to my second slide, I have images that focus more on texture. The sky photos to me look dangerous. Usually, a sky feels open and free, but these make me feel a little claustrophobic. And the Pumpkinhead poster, Conjuring, and Spooky Slasher all have a similar harshness and sharpness that will definitely be a big part of my diorama. And lastly, this photo of blue trees surrounded by fallen leaves. This photo is amazing. The hill or valley in this photo goes from the very bottom of the frame to the top, and I think that the difference in height will be an important thing to give my models a sense of spooky power. And that is the magic of the mood board. A few minutes ago, I had no idea where to start, and now my head is spilling over with ideas. Now that I have the Halloween spirit flowing through my veins, along with some Halloween, it's time to start gathering the spooky characters for my masterpiece. First things first, just like a zombie needs a brain, a diorama needs a focal point. And we ain't no stinking landscape artists, we play with toys. So I need to find some models that will put me in the Halloween mood all year round. Luckily, Reaper has the answer. Reaper has a Frankensteinly, frightening diverse range of models. And soon enough, I had some scary models arriving on my doorstep. Boo! And bam! Here they are. Talk about prime shipping. It's fantastic. Now that I have my spooky models, I can quickly photograph them, so I can begin phase 2, the second batch. With this horrifying diorama, you could even call it spooky. I'm not going for photorealistic, I'm going for impressionistic. I want to exaggerate the features, give everything a little more edge, brighter colors and harsher angles, and a dash of pumpkin spice. Now I move on to drawing a 2D representation of my diorama. Here I can try out some ideas and layouts that further help discover what is so easy to picture in my brain, but is so hard to put into the real world. And speaking of real world, I will conjure this in the digital world. First thing I do is carve out the photos of my models. This is simple enough to do in Photoshop, but you can do it in any photo editor, probably even the tool you use to create your mood board, like PowerPoints. Remember, at this stage, everything is still rough. This is known as the iterative design process. Create a design, test it, then tweak it. I would much rather do that here on the computer than knee-deep in hot glue and candy corn. So here is my first pass. I don't like it. But that's okay, because once you have something in front of you, you can see instantly what you don't want. Once you've discovered all the things you don't want, you should be left with the thing that you do. And remember, we aren't making a work of art. That comes later. This is just the planning stage. Second try. I like it better. I like the figures arranged in a circle. Now that I have something that is working for me, I can begin adding, creating, and shaping for my final project. I decided to add some corn stalks to help fill up space on the sides to pull attention to the middle. And the backdrop of the moon will help with this too, to further frame my pumpkin head as the centerpiece. I also decided to work in purple and orange because spooky. Alright, third time's the charm, and this drawing speaks to me. I can now take this and make it a reality. Now that I have my design, it's time to move into the 3D space and begin making up some plans. Some people skip all that prep work and start here, but to those ghouls I say, which please. I have a map to safely guide me out of the spooky forest and into the building stage. The first thing I will need is a base, and to make the base, I will need to know how big and what shape it should be. I take my sinister sapling, petrifying pumpkins, and my spooky spirit, and spread them on a piece of paper. I use a pencil and outline them, roughly deciding where they will end up. I trace my shapes, then cut out the base with an X-Acto. I take that piece of paper and glue stick it onto some wood, or in this case, particle board. Then I carve it out on my scroll saw. I believe this tool made its first film debut in the documentary series Saw. Now, with my base cut out, I'm already 10% of the way there. Now that I have my base, it's time to start building it up. My diorama is going to have a lot of height, so I want to create this by hot gluing on some decorative bark. This can be stolen from parks and gardens or found at the Floral section of a hardware store or craft store. You can use foam for this, but I don't like foam as much because it's very soft and can be melted with hot glue and is generally a pain to work with, but is very important and useful for making dioramas. Just maybe not this one. And because my diorama is so small, I don't need to worry about tacking on mass, because even if I use wood for everything, it's not going to get too heavy. As I work, I continually check my figures to see how they are fitting on the model. Now I have my elevations, but it's a little bit of a hot glue mess, so it's time to start smoothing things out, and I'm going to be doing this with a product called Duraham's Water Putty. It's a chemical formula that activates with water to a putty-like consistency, similar to Bondo or green stuff. It's workable for about 5 minutes before it begins to set, so I quickly squish it on and let it dry. I could also do this by using some cat litter and superglue. This works just as well, although you will be left with a bumpy surface. But sometimes that's what you want. I wouldn't use Milliput or green stuff for this though, it would just be too darn expensive. Now that my diorama is roughed out, I plug in my models to see how they fit. I'm using poster tack to do this, which is a model maker's best friend. It's a little bit tacky, but it shouldn't damage the models or the diorama. As I'm doing this, I use my Photoshop drawing to help me know where I want to put my miniatures. And at this stage, I clip the pumpkins off the sprue, because knowing me, if I had done this sooner, I would have lost one or two. Now that I have all my models placed, I can take a look at how they work, and I find that this pumpkin on the left-hand side has nowhere to sit, and I'd like my pumpkin head to be standing just a little bit higher up. But not to worry, this is all part of the iterative design process. I break back out the decorative bark, and I remove my pumpkin head model, and I add more wood to the areas where I need it. Then I remove the models, and I mix up some more Duraham's water putty for the new parts. The thing to keep in mind while working with Duraham's water putty is it activates with water, so you don't want to be putting it down the sink. While working with Duraham's, I washed my hands in the bucket and then poured the contents outside when I was done. I applied the putty over the new areas I glued down. This was my last pass with the Duraham's, so I checked all around the model to see if there was any areas I'd missed. Now my diorama is getting close to being done, so I begin by adding on my tree. To attach my tree, I mix myself up some Milliput. Milliput is a 2-part epoxy that dries rock hard and is going to give me a really nice bond between the metal tree and the Duraham base. And I'm going to be using the Milliput to create a seamless transition between the base of the model and my diorama. I apply a drop of superglue between the base and the Milliput, and then another drop of superglue between the Milliput and the tree. And now it's time to make my dirt look like dirt, so I'm going to be making myself a big batch of texture paste. To do this, I'm mixing together some wall spackle, Elmer's glue, fine-grained sand, and a few drops of black ink. Once my evil concoction is mixed up, I begin applying it to the base using a damp brush. I'm applying this to all the flat parts of the base, keeping it off of the faces because I want to leave those exposed so that they look like exposed rock. This texture paste is going to be what makes my diorama look like a spooky pumpkin patch. And the reason I've already put on my tree is so that I could put the texture paste over the base of the model. Next, I'm going to be making some scale corn stalks. First, I take some green construction paper and I draw some small leaves next to one edge. Then I use my X-Acto to carefully cut out these leaves. Once that's done, this leaves me with a string of corn leaves. Next, I'm going to make the corn stalks, and I'm going to be making this out of some floral wire. First, I fold it into fourths, and then I put it into my drill so that I can twist it up. You could probably also do this with a Dremel tool. To make my corn stalk, I carefully glue the paper to the top of the stalk, and then I wrap it around and around. Once I have the length I want, I glue down the paper, and then I use some wire cutters to cut through the stalk. Then I fold the leaves into shape with my fingers. And that's how you make a scale corn stalk. Now it's time to finally glue the models onto the base. To do this, I'm going to mix up some green stuff. I'm going to be putting a drop of green stuff underneath each model to get better contact with the base. To make sure that I was putting the models in the correct positions, I was referencing a photo I took earlier. Taking work in progress photos is important, not just for Instagram, but so that you can reference them later if you forget what you're doing. I attach all of my spooky pumpkins, and then I use the remaining green stuff to attach the last branches of the tree. Next, I take a pin vise and an 1/8 inch drill bit, and I drill some holes to attach my corn. And so I know where to place the corn, I go back and I look at my Photoshop reference. Here, I'm finding that it was very helpful to make the corn all different sizes so that they're all standing about the same height on the base. And there's my spooky, spooky corn. My diorama is really coming together now. The only thing left is to pin Pumpkinhead into the middle. To do this, I make a small notch with my hobby knife, and then I drill a small hole with a pin vise. I insert a paper clip, and then I decide right where Pumpkinhead is going to be on the model. I drill a small hole into the base, and then I attach my little buddy into his spooky diorama. Now my diorama is finished, but I decided I want to take a Dremel tool to the bottom of the base, so I remove my corn. Then I take my Dremel tool and I carefully trim down the base. Now the only thing left is to give this model a backdrop, so I find a piece of styrene and I mark out where I want to cut it. The easiest way to draw a circle is just to trace it around something the same size. Then I carefully score my styrene and then I break it along the edge. And then I cleaned up the cut edge with a nail file. Well friends, we have made some impressive progress and are well on our way to a frighteningly finished display. It's very exciting to look back at all the iterations that led me to the finished diorama, and I cannot wait to get paint on it. Speaking of, tune in Friday for the horrifying conclusion. And remember, when black cats prowl and pumpkins shine, and shivery shivers run down your spine, when ghosts and goblins ring and chime, beware and be scared, it's Halloween time. See you next time, you spooky devils.